What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today, we've got our first 2023 NFL mock draft of the season, and I figured what better time to take a look at this than right now with the actual 2023 NFL draft just a few weeks away. Should be very, very entertaining. And look, we're not going to waste any more time. You know the deal. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe. Give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. And most importantly, let us hear it in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree with these picks? Who do you want your team to select in this 2023 NFL draft? Always love those discussions. But with that being said, let's kick it off here. And obviously at the 101, we have got the Carolina Panthers. Now, a quick note, there's not going to be any trades in this first 1.0 mock. I want to kind of get a feel for it before we spice things up in future versions. So don't worry, we're going to introduce trades later on. And here, I'm just going to do this based on who I think, kind of makes the most sense with these selections. But also, obviously, try and keep it as realistic as possible. But again, getting back to the Carolina Panthers, obviously they have the first overall pick after their huge trade with the Chicago Bears. You don't make that type of trade unless you're selecting a quarterback. The big question is, which quarterback will it be? One, Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud has been the favorite pretty much since that trade went down. All the talk with Frank Reich, how he likes those bigger quarterbacks. CJ Stroud fits the bill. There's durability concerns with Bryce Young. But as of late, there's been sources, Schefter, Mort, Vegas, now making Bryce Young the co-favorite. Huge shift in the odds. I'm a Bryce Young guy. I think he is the best overall quarterback in this class. And with some of these rumors as of late, I think momentum is going his way. I'm giving the edge to Bryce Young here. He is the first overall pick in this draft. And then the Texans, I think they're honestly in a win-win situation here for Houston. Whoever the Panthers pass on at quarterback, I think the Houston Texans go with the next guy. It's been Bryce Young for the longest period of time, but that's when people assumed CJ Stroud would be the number one guy. I'm not saying that that's not going to happen, but either way, I think the Texans are in a good position. I don't buy into the idea if Bryce Young isn't there, they're going to pass on a quarterback. I think right now is a great moment for them to select that future signal caller, and I still think that CJ Stroud can be a very good quarterback, even if I do have Bryce Young a little bit higher. So we're going CJ Stroud here. Then Arizona Cardinals at number 3. This would be a peak position to trade down for Arizona, but since we're not looking at that, I'm just going with the best non-quarterback player in this draft class for me. That is Will Anderson. They need help on the defensive line. JJ Watt retires. In general, they just have needs at that position for a while now. So let's go with Will Anderson here. I think he's one of the safer picks in this entire draft. I think he can be an excellent edge rusher in the NFL for years to come. Then we've got the Indianapolis Colts, and luckily for them in this version of our mock, they don't have to trade up to get a quarterback. Instead, they have either Will Levis or Anthony Richardson fall into their laps. I think it's probably going to be Anthony Richardson here. Will Levis is a guy that's also been linked to the Colts, but I think as of late, maybe some of his interviews, things like that, have knocked him down a couple of spots. In some people's eyes, we'll see. And then obviously with Richardson, the ceiling is just higher than Bryce Young, than CJ Stroud. It's insane. So maybe that's what kind of tantalizes the Colts here. So we're going Anthony Richardson to Indianapolis. Then we go to Seattle here. I think this is going to come down to one of two guys. I think it's going to be on the defensive line. It's going to be either Jalen Carter or Tyree Wilson. I think right now, maybe some teams in the top 5 are saying, well, Jalen Carter, he's got some off the field issues, obviously, didn't have the best performance during his workouts. So I'm going to give the slight edge here to Tyree Wilson, but wouldn't shock me at all if Jalen Carter is the selection. And then I think the Detroit Lions afterwards are in a great position. They need interior defensive lineman help. Jalen Carter is, if it wasn't for the off the field things, he'd be a top 3 pick. You could argue he could be the 101 if the Chicago Bears hadn't traded away their selection to the Carolina Panthers. So I'm going Jalen Carter here. I think this is an excellent pick for the Detroit Lions, obviously assuming there are no off the field issues moving forward for Jalen Carter. Then we go to the Raiders here, another team that could go quarterback, but I kind of think of it this way: is Will Levis that much better than Jimmy Garoppolo? I honestly don't think so. The Raiders, they ponied up for Jimmy, and I think they could be in a situation where maybe they're looking at next year's quarterback class and saying, all right, we'd rather take a chance there. So I wouldn't be shocked if Levis goes here, but I think maybe a guy like a Christian Gonzalez. The Raiders also have needs in that secondary, also makes a lot of sense. I think it's neck and neck between Witherspoon and Gonzalez. I actually have Witherspoon ranked a little bit higher, but Gonzalez seemingly across NFL circles has kind of emerged as the number one cornerback here in this draft class. Then we go to the Atlanta Falcons. I think the Falcons are a team where, they're not going to go quarterback. They just selected Ritter last year. Wide receiver, they've got Drake London. So a couple guys here come to mind. I'm looking at the defensive line, and I'm looking at somebody, potentially like Van Ness from Iowa, or a guy like a Miles Murphy from Clemson. To me, it's going to be one of these top three guys. It's going to be either Van Ness, Nolan Smith, or Miles Murphy. I've seen, the links to Miles Murphy. I'm going to give him the edge here. I think if it's, again, defensive line, it's going to be one of these three names, kind of a flip of a coin type of situation. Then we go to the Chicago Bears, the former number one overall pick, but after trading down with the Panthers, huge haul for them, great position if you're a Chicago Bears fan. I think the two positions here, you got to look at offensive line or wide receiver. My number one wide receiver, Jackson Smith-Njigba, but, the Bears didn't do as much as some would have liked in free agency on the offensive line. They missed out on some big names. So I think here, with how much you've invested in Justin Fields, offensive line makes a lot of sense. I think there's going to be some good wide receivers still around in the second round. And here, I think you go with the guy in Peter Skoronski that gives you a little bit more flexibility on the offensive line, as opposed to Paris Johnson from Ohio State, who I actually have as my number one offensive lineman. But Skoronski, maybe guard and or tackle as well. Gives you more flexibility, more options there for the Chicago Bears to find the best fit for him. So I'm going with him in that situation. Then we have got the Philadelphia Eagles. What do the Eagles do here? To me, they could go one of two ways with this first selection. I think it's going to be either a defensive end or like a D tackle. I would probably say that, running back maybe also in the running, maybe a Bijan Robinson, but top 10 way too early for him. And they did add Rashad Penny. So I'm going to go with the kid in Lucas Van Ness that has been a hot riser as of late. From Iowa, defensive end. They need to get younger on that defensive line, so let's go with Van Ness here for them. And then for the Tennessee Titans, look, after letting Taylor Lewan walk, they need to replace him on that offensive line. I think it's Paris Johnson or Skoronski, whichever one is available, whoever potentially the Bears pass on. Again, I said it, I think Paris Johnson is the best offensive lineman, the best tackle in this class. He can slot in that position, so let's go with Paris Johnson to the Titans. And then we've got the Houston Texans again making a second selection. They got their quarterback with the second overall pick. Now I think it makes a lot of sense to pair him with a nice, young, talented wide receiver. To me, my number one wide receiver, like I said before, Jackson Smith-Njigba. Don't spend too much time on this selection. The wide receiver room leaves a lot to be desired in Houston. No more Brendan Cooks as well. So let's add the Ohio State wide receiver. Then we've got the New York Jets. So a couple things could still change here. Aaron Rodgers still hasn't been traded to the New York Jets. So we'll see what happens there. I'm looking at an offensive lineman here, though. You need some help on the offensive line with some uncertainties that you have to protect an older Aaron Rodgers. I'm going here personally with Broderick Jones from Georgia. A polished guy, proven program. and he fits the bill in terms of what the Jets need. Then we go to the New England Patriots. They could go a plethora of different directions here. They could go quarterback with, all the drama that's been surrounding Mac Jones, but let's assume that Mac Jones is still the guy for New England. I think that a name that makes a lot of sense here for the New England Patriots is a local guy. Boston College, Zay Flowers, top 3 wide receiver in a lot of people's eyes, a little bit smaller, but, he's been linked heavily to the New England Patriots. I think it's a pick that makes a lot of sense, a pairing that makes a lot of sense. So let's go with that here. Then we have got the Green Bay Packers, assuming it's going to be the Jordan Love show, because pretty much everything tells you that they're moving on from Aaron Rodgers. They could go, again, a lot of different directions. I think they could continue to add some more wide receiver help, offensive line, defensive help, but tight end also makes a lot of sense. I really like Michael Mayer. I think a lot of people have kind of, just because he didn't test necessarily the best, have knocked him down, but he's an elite pass blocker as well. I really like him. He's still my number 1 guy at the tight end position this year. I'm going with him to the Green Bay Packers. So now we go to Washington. And again, this is a team that does need potentially quarterback help. I think this is right around the spot where you're going to see the mid-teens for Will Levis, unless somebody trades up. But again, we're not entertaining those scenarios in this first mock. So I'm going with Will Levis here. A situation, Carson Wentz didn't work out. Heineke no longer there. So let's go with Will Levis here. They didn't really upgrade the quarterback position otherwise. So to me, it's a move that does make a lot of sense. Potentially your quarterback of the future. Next, we go to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think here it's either offensive line or cornerback. Devin Witherspoon, I think, is going to be very, very tempting at this point in time. But also, do you go best player available? Do you go need? You need to protect Kenny Pickett, that offensive line, to see if he has it. I'm going to be partial to that position, and I'm going to go with a guy in Darnell Wright, who I think can be a starter for them pretty much day one. Now, here we have got the Detroit Lions back on the clock. To me, I think this is a perfect scenario for them. If the Pittsburgh Steelers pass on cornerback and pass on a guy like Devin Witherspoon, I think that's the easy pick for them here for Detroit. So let's go with that. Also, another name to consider, maybe tight end, maybe somebody like a Dalton Kincaid after they traded away TJ Hawkinson. But I think Witherspoon to really revamp that defense with their first 2 picks, Carter, Witherspoon, a great start for the Detroit Lions. Now we go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Obviously, no more Tom Brady. He's retiring, officially, I believe now. But with no more Will Levis here, the top 4 quarterbacks are off the board. I'm not a Hendon Hooker believer in the first round. I don't have a first round grade on him. So we're going to pass on that. Instead, offensive line or best player available defensively, the guys that I'm looking at, Kalijah Kancey and or Brian Branch, the Tampa Bay Bucks like that Alabama connection. I like Brian Branch. I think he's the top overall safety in this class. It's not even close, and it fits an area of need. So Branch to the Bucks. Then we go to Seattle Seahawks. They went edge rusher with their first pick. So now makes sense if you want to, protect somebody like Geno Smith or your future quarterback, whoever that is, with the offensive line selection. Let's look at some interior offensive linemen. Osiris Torrance is a guy that I think is going to be right around this 20s range guard, fits the bill, makes sense to me with Seattle. Then Miami, they forfeit their pick, so we skip all the way to the Chargers. And the Chargers are an interesting team. Look, they keep Keenan Allen, but that wide receiver position is getting a little bit older. So you could go wide receiver. You could go a Quentin Johnson. You could go cornerback help as well. But I think a position not enough people are talking about with the Chargers, Dalton Kincaid, tight end, maybe to be that Hunter Henry 2.0. Gerald Everett filled in nicely, but he's not, he's not as young as a Kincaid. That was just kind of a stopper fill-in position. So to me, we are going Kincaid here for the Chargers. Then we go to the Baltimore Ravens. Look, they could still be a player and shake things up here in this draft if they trade Lamar Jackson. But as of right now, that hasn't happened. So we're going to operate under the assumption that he is still the quarterback for this team. And if that's the case, I think you need either a wide receiver, preferably a wide receiver or cornerback. So the two picks that make the most sense for me here are Joey Porter Jr. or Quentin Johnson. But again, to make Lamar Jackson happy, you've got Rashad Bateman. But after that, not much else in my opinion. I'm going Quentin Johnston here for the Baltimore Ravens from TCU. Then we've got the Minnesota Vikings. Look, they lost Adam Thielen, but they've got Justin Jefferson. I think you can find wide receiver help a little bit later on. So defense is kind of the focus point for me here. I'm going best available player. I think this is right around the point where you go best available player. Mid-20s, Kalijah Cansey, interior defensive lineman, makes a lot of sense. Let's pair him with the Minnesota Vikings. Then we go to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Again, you could go offensive lineman, you could go edge, or you could go defensive back as well. Joey Porter Jr., I mentioned his name with, the Ravens, right around this range. So I'm going to pair him here with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I really do think the Jaguars could go a variety of different ways. A little bit of a tough pick to really, really pinpoint. Next, we go to the New York Giants. Look, I'm not going to lie to you. I think the Giants, they should still add wide receiver help. I really, really do believe that. Or they could go the other direction and go with an offensive lineman to continue to protect. Look, you just paid Daniel Jones, continue to provide lanes for Saquon Barkley. I think a guy like Steve Avila makes a lot of sense. Maybe you look at the center position as well. I'm going to go with Avila here, however, and continue to beef up that offensive line. Then with the 26th pick, we've got the Dallas Cowboys. Again, a very interesting team. I think that here you see the need at the running back position. Bijan Robinson going to be really, really tempting here. A guy from Texas. Ezekiel Elliott no longer with the team. Tony Pollard playing on the franchise tag. I think Bijan Robinson here could be the selection. Take some pressure off of Dak Prescott. And then if they move on from Tony Pollard after this year, I mean, Bijan Robinson arguably could already in his second year be like a top 5, top 10 running back in the NFL. By far and away the best running back prospect in this draft class. So let's pair him up with the Dallas Cowboys. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. The Buffalo Bills could very well be a team that's also looking at Bijan Robinson, narrowly misses out on him. And favorably, however, for the Buffalo Bills, I think for the last couple of years, they've been in a position where you can just go best player available. And here it fits a need. It fits right around his ADP, his draft range. Deontay Banks, cornerback, Maryland. Let's make that pairing for the Buffalo Bills. Then here we've got the Cincinnati Bengals. They could go tight end, but I think that the top 2 tight ends are kind of off the board. Then there's a little bit of a gap. You don't have to force it. Instead, again, defensive side of the football. Your offense is already stacked. It really is, from wide receiver to running back. We'll see what happens with Joe Mixon. Obviously, Joe Burrow, they made some signings on the offensive line as well. So let's go with the area of need. Brian Bresee from Clemson, interior defensive lineman, fits the bill here. Next, we go to the New Orleans Saints. They're a team that obviously invested in Derek Carr. So what do? How are you going to protect him? You need some offensive line pieces. Question is, do you go tackle? Do you go with a pick like interior offensive lineman? To me, I'd probably lean tackle. I think the value is a little bit better, then gives you abilities to shuffle things afterwards. So I'm going Anton Harrison here for the New Orleans Saints. For the Eagles, They got their edge rusher with their first pick. Now you could go with, the offensive line. You need some help there. And honestly, I think it's a situation where you could go tackle, you could go interior offensive lineman again. How long is a guy like Kelsey going to continue to be there? So I think a guy from Ohio State, Luke Whippler, makes a lot of sense. It's going to be between him and, the next best offensive tackle, probably. I give the slight edge, however, to DeJuan Jones. So let's pair him here with the Philadelphia Eagles. And then we have got the Kansas City Chiefs, Super Bowl champions. Again, I don't love the wide receiver situation for the Kansas City Chiefs. So Jordan Addison is a guy that I think makes a lot of sense here. But, so is upgrading the defensive line. Nolan Smith at this point, I think, is a really, really good value pick. So I really do think the needs here are spot on. They've made some additions in free agency at wide receiver, but it's nothing special. So again, Jordan Addison, very, very tempting. But I think Nolan Smith is a little bit more of a premier position edge rusher. So that's going to be the pick here to round out this first 2023 mock draft of ours. So let us hear in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree with these picks? What do you want your team to do? Keep an eye out for future mocks here as we get closer and closer that will include trades, so should get even more interesting. And if you guys enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at alldaypigskin to continue interacting with us there. Again, make sure to let us hear in the comment section. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.